Sagittarius, your father once told you something. Not with words, but with a silent gaze, with the way his hand rested gently on your shoulder just as you were about to collapse, and with his presence, during the moments when no one else remained. He may have never said, "I love you." He wasn't good at showing it. He might have been stern, even cold. But once, he said something that made time stop, something you felt so deeply. And then, because life moved too fast, you, Sagittarius, always moving forward, let it slip away like a thin strand of smoke drifting through the memories of your childhood. You didn't mean to forget. But you lived for so long in distant journeys and faraway dreams, you forgot where you began. A sentence, a belief, a gaze that never looked away. And today, the universe doesn't remind you to make you go back, but so you'll remember this. That message, once the key to your heart, is now finding its way back to you. Sagittarius, some words aren't loud, aren't poetic, but they reach the deepest parts of the soul. You once heard them, on a day you failed when you came home exhausted. Your father didn't scold you. He didn't comfort you either. He just looked at you and said quietly, "No one's asking you to be perfect. Just don't give up on yourself." You forgot those words, somewhere between the burdens and the pressure. But today, your heart is calling them back. Because perhaps this is the moment you need them more than ever. There are words that don't need time to be remembered, because they don't live in memory. They live in the chest. You once heard such a sentence from a man who didn't know how to express emotion, but every time he stood behind you, his heart whispered through his eyes. Do you remember? A windless afternoon. You came back, no longer the child eager to win, but a chipped soul, scattering trust along the roads you thought you were strong enough to walk alone. You feared his gaze, feared the blame, feared the feeling of having disappointed him again. But he didn't ask, didn't speak, didn't reach out to touch your sorrow. He just stood there like an old tree, one that never blossomed, but held its roots deep in the very soil where you once grew. And then, so softly, a sentence slipped out like a leaf falling slowly onto your shoulder. No one's asking you to be perfect, just don't give up on yourself. That was all. But the whole world you had been carrying suddenly felt just a little lighter. Since that day, you no longer feared failure like before, because you knew no one loves you because you never fall. People love you when you dare to rise again, even when your knees are still bleeding. But then you grew up. Pride grew louder than tenderness. Success came, bringing with it endless definitions of worth. And that old sentence, like a worn coat, was left hanging in a drawer of memories you no longer opened. You rushed ahead, ran faster than your feelings, held yourself tighter than the storm. And sometimes, you forgot that you once had a place called home. A place where someone once believed you didn't need to prove anything to be worthy of love. And just like how Sagittarius always lives, you kept going, kept looking forward, even though what you needed most was behind you. The gentle affirmation of a sentence that once saved you. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night without knowing why? Have you ever felt tired but couldn't tell where the tiredness lived? That's not your body speaking, that's your soul gasping for air. Because it's been far too long since you returned to the softest part of yourself. The part someone once quietly protected with the simplest things. An unjudging gaze, an unconditional presence, and a sentence, not poetic, but strong enough to lift you for a lifetime. Just don't give up on yourself. Have you ever asked, why do the most honest words haunt us the longest? Because truth, like an underground stream, doesn't need to scream. It only needs to flow right into the cracks of your heart to bring life again. That sentence wasn't just a reminder. It was a seed, and you forgot it, simply because you were too busy planting other people's expectations in the garden of your own soul. But today, the universe is doing what only the universe can do, calling you home by reviving a memory you thought had long been asleep. It's not a memory of a perfect father. It's the memory of a time you saw yourself clearly, through the eyes of someone who once wished you'd never lose the light inside you. Because he knew there are some wounds no one else can heal except you, when you finally choose to never turn your back on yourself again. He may no longer be here, but his gaze still lives in every decision you're about to give up on. It returns every time you stand at a crossroads and your heart whispers, "Don't forget, you were once the light. You don't need to run faster than anyone. You don't need to win everything. You don't need to strain just to earn love. You only need to live as yourself, true, enough, and unapologetically so. And that is the purest essence Sagittarius was born with. True freedom that begins when you stop abandoning yourself. And if right now your heart softens, if a tear just fell for no clear reason, don't be so quick to wipe it away, because maybe your soul is finally receiving what it has waited for all this time. A sentence that needs no fixing, only to be lived again. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to not give up on yourself. If this reminded you of something that once warmed your spirit, leave a comment below the video. I'm still here, and I'm still myself. Because who knows, the words you leave today might become a shelter for someone else, someone lost in the middle of their own life. Can you hear it? In the stillness, there is a sound so familiar, like your father's voice. Not harsh, not loud, just like a soft wind brushing through your heart, whispering, "Welcome home." But if that once touched you so deeply, if that sentence once lifted you at your most fragile, then why did you forget? Not because it wasn't important, not because you wanted to forget, but maybe because life made you carry too much. Too much noise, too many roles, too many times you had to brace yourself just to survive, instead of simply living as you are. And in that moment, something sacred slowly got pushed to the edges of your heart. Silently, no announcement, no warning bell. You didn't notice when it happened, but your soul remembers with perfect clarity. So then, when did you begin drifting away from yourself? And what was it that made you walk away from the very thing that once saved you? Let's touch that truth right now. Have you ever asked yourself, since when did I lose the one thing that once lit up my soul? Something that wasn't loud, didn't fight for a place, yet once rescued me when I was at my lowest? You didn't try to forget it. It's just that, amid the noise of the world, your heart could no longer hear that gentle call. Like a single raindrop falling among thousands of others, not gone, just blended in. You grew up. You entered that world they call adulthood, where people teach you how to survive, but never how to live true. You had to be strong, had to be rational, had to be agreeable, had to silence your dreams just to keep your job. You had to hold yourself together in hollow relationships just because you feared being alone. And each time you said, "I'm fine," when you weren't, a small part of you, the part that knew how to listen, quietly faded. You didn't know. That old sentence your father once said, "You don't need to be perfect, just don't give up on yourself," was being buried too, beneath layers and layers of rent payments, unanswered emails, and emotionless deadlines. It didn't disappear. It just sat there, in a very deep corner, like a small flame still glowing in the long night, waiting for you to stop, turn around, and breathe. And dear Sagittarius, if today is the day you pause, know this, that flame's never extinguished. It was simply waiting for the one born to carry light, to remember who they are. Sagittarius, have you ever looked into the mirror and seen a stranger? Someone who is living right but not living real? Someone who can accomplish everything but no longer sees themselves in it? For a Sagittarius who once loved freedom, loved ideals and roads never taken, losing yourself is the deepest wound, and one that no one but you can heal. That is the sign that you've gone too far from your core, that you're living out of habit, not out of feeling. And emotions, when starved for too long, stop speaking, they just retreat. Your soul isn't angry, it's just waiting, like a child sitting by the door, clutching an old blanket, waiting for you to return. Waiting for you, Sagittarius, the dreamer, the seeker, to remember the simple soul in your heart. Waiting for you to remember, there was once a place, so real, so soft, so safe. Why did you forget that sentence? Because the world taught you how to be right, but never how to feel whole. Because you were praised when you succeeded, but seen as weak whenever you paused to breathe. Because you got so used to holding it all together, you forgot the quiet whisper of your own heart, the one that also needed to be heard. For a Sagittarius, sometimes the drive to move forward is so fierce, you lose the tender sound of your own soul. And so, you walk on, like someone wearing shoes that are too tight, until you can no longer feel when your toes began to ache. But isn't it strange? Some things, the more deeply buried they are, the brighter they shine. A memory, a look, a sentence. They don't die, they just transform into unnamed aches, into emptiness that creeps in even when you succeed, into sleepless nights for reasons you can't explain. They return like the wind, invisible, colorless, without sound. But when they pass through your heart, you know something wants to be remembered. Because you are Sagittarius, and wind is your element, it always finds its way back. You forgot what it feels like to be touched by truth, to be seen, not for how well you performed, but simply for being you. That sentence from your father was like a fragile thread that once connected you to the light within. But then you cut it. Not on purpose, but because you had to keep going, had to survive, had to prove yourself. Don't blame yourself. This world has never been kind to those who are too honest with their emotions. But that thread is still there, waiting to be mended, with the gentleness you once forgot to give yourself. Have you ever sat in your car, surrounded by a sea of people, and suddenly felt an emptiness that took your breath away? Have you ever smiled at a crowded party while your heart quietly whispered, "Who am I in all of this?" Sagittarius, you are a wild soul in a modern city, and what you're hearing now is the echo from that untamed part of you, calling you home. Those very moments, they're invitations from your soul, a signal that it's time to return, not to your house, but to yourself. To that sentence that once stopped your tears and taught you how to rise on real feet with a real heart. You just need to not give up on yourself. That sentence isn't for happy days. It's for the days you're not sure you even believe in the light anymore. It's a small candle that your father, clumsy and rough, tried to place in your hands. He didn't know how to keep it burning, but he knew you were the one worthy of carrying it, because you, Sagittarius, were born of light, and that light never died. It was only veiled by the fog of all the desires that didn't come from within. And if today, as you read these words, you feel a small catch in your breath, please don't hide it. That's the signal. That sentence has come alive again. And you, after all the detours, can still return to where you were once most true. If this reminds you of something that once warmed you, leave a sentence in the comments below the video. I heard it, and this time, I won't forget. You are Sagittarius, and when you remember something sacred, you have the power to carry it farther than anyone else. Because who knows, the words you write today may be the hand that ties the thread back together for another soul out there. A soul who also once left behind the most precious part of themselves. Are you ready? Not to keep running, but to sit down, face yourself, and gently say, "My dear self, maybe we can begin again from the place we once left behind." And then there always comes a moment when time seems to pause, a thin ray of light slipping through the window, a strange sentence that lands exactly on an old wound, a familiar song that plays just when you least expect it. It's not coincidence. It's a signal. From a place you can't name, but your soul remembers. Sagittarius has always had a sacred connection to the universe, and right now, you are being called home. Because the universe never forgets those who are learning to return. And when you're ready, it will send you the first sign. There are things you don't need to try to remember. Because when the time comes, they return on their own, like a quiet breeze brushing past a curtain that's slightly open, like light slipping through dense leaves, not rushing, not speaking, just enough for you to pause and breathe. You've come a long way. Maybe on the map, you've only moved homes a few times, but within your soul, you've lived many lives. A life of someone who longed to be accepted. A life of someone carrying invisible wounds. A life of someone who believed they had to be perfect, just to deserve love. Sagittarius is not afraid of change, but you must learn not to abandon your true self each time you shift and transform. You never realized that every step you took away from yourself was one step the universe took backward. Not to judge you, but so you wouldn't feel pressured to return. Because true light never forces you to walk the right path. It simply keeps sending signals and waits. Maybe you've already seen that signal, but didn't know what to call it. A song that suddenly plays right when you feel empty. A sentence from a stranger that makes your throat tighten for no apparent reason. A strange dream that loops again and again like an unfinished circle. Or simply a feeling of remembering something you can't explain in words. Don't dismiss those moments, because that's how the universe touches your soul, when your mind no longer wants to listen. I used to believe that awakening comes as a shock, a big loss, a pain you can't avoid. But after many journeys with the people I've met, I realized this. Some souls, like Sagittarius, don't need to crash to awaken. They just need one silence, deep enough. And that is you. You, the one who's grown used to the noise. You, who once thought you had to fight to survive. You, who no longer remember what complete peace truly feels like. It's you, being called home, not by loud bells, but by a quiet stillness trembling in your heart. If any of this has reached you, leave a sentence in the comments. I am Sagittarius, and I have heard the call to return. Because maybe that one sentence will be the flame that lights the path for someone else who once felt as lost as you. Sagittarius. There's a sentence I always carry with me. Awakening is not an action. It is a remembering, a memory of the soul. You didn't learn this from anyone. You don't need anyone to teach you that you once belonged to the light. You only need a moment of stillness. And one moment real enough for that light to echo again. And when it does, you won't be who you used to be. Not because you've completely changed, but because you've returned to the truest version of yourself. The version that was never judged, never forced, never forgotten. For a Sagittarius, one who always seeks truth with a burning heart, this is not a mystery. It is destiny's reminder. Can you feel it? Something lately has made you softer, not weaker, softer. You find yourself moved by the smallest things. A bird gliding across the sky, an elderly person sitting alone, a child sleeping on the bus. And you wonder, am I being too emotional? No, you're not too emotional. You're simply opening your eyes again to see the things that had long been covered in the dust of time. You are touching something most people rush past. Life, presence, and the sacred voice within you. The universe never forces you to believe. It sets no deadlines. It never says hurry. It only asks you, very quietly, are you ready to listen? And when your heart begins to tremble, when something old suddenly comes alive again, that is the signal. A sacred memory reaching out from beneath layers of dust, not to be recalled by reason, but received through opening. Sagittarius often overlooks the small signs in search of distant horizons. But this time, what matters most doesn't come from far away. It comes from something very close, inside you. Don't be surprised if you cry for no reason. Don't pull away if you feel like being held. Don't be ashamed if you suddenly feel small, because that is the moment you are most true to yourself. Maybe it took you years to become strong, but now is the time to learn how to be soft again, without feeling like you failed. That too is a form of strength. A strength that only comes after you've played enough roles. I don't know exactly what's calling you right now, but I do know this. If you're still reading these words, then you've heard it. Maybe it's something your father once said. Maybe it's the memory of a time you believed in yourself. Maybe it's the dream you once tucked away to live a more reasonable life. But the universe, in the gentlest way, is knocking on your door again. Are you ready to open it? If you've ever felt called by something you couldn't name, leave a sentence below this video. I am ready to listen. Because maybe what you write today will be the sign someone else has been praying for. And if right now your heart no longer resists, if tears fall for no reason, if you smile softly without knowing why, then know this. You've just stepped into a sacred moment. A moment when the universe no longer waits but begins to whisper. Can you hear it now? What you needed never truly left you. For Sagittarius, the one who carries light across the skies, this is a summons. You no longer need to go far. The light is making its way back to you. You don't need to know every step ahead. You only need to believe the first one is enough. And that first step is always the decision to no longer abandon yourself. Even if you forgot who you were, even if you chose the wrong person, the wrong place, the wrong path, even if there were days you wanted to end it all, you can still begin again, with gentleness, with an unblaming gaze, with one simple sentence, I've come back. For Sagittarius, the one who once carried fire far away from themselves, in search of meaning, this is not weakness, this is a profound courage. If these words soften something in you, in the most beautiful way, leave a comment below the video. I'm learning how to love myself again. Because perhaps your quiet recovery will become the doorway for someone else who is standing at the edge between enduring and healing. You don't have to become someone entirely new. You just have to remember the person you were before the world convinced you that you weren't enough. And once you dare to stop and hold the softest part of yourself, the old wound will begin to close. Not because you forced yourself to forget, but because you've stopped rejecting who you are. This is not the end of your journey. This is the most beautiful part. The part where you no longer have to act strong, yet still get to stand in the light. The part where the universe, in its gentlest way, reminds you, you were never late. You arrived at the exact moment your heart was ready to open again. And if you've stayed with me until this very last moment, please know one thing. You've done something many are still afraid to do. You dared to pause. You dared to listen. You dared to return inward, without needing applause, without the spotlight, just one deep breath, and a heart softly whispering, I am here, whole, with nothing left to prove. I don't know who you are, where you live, or how much you're holding inside. But if these words have touched you, then I believe. A part of your soul has just been awakened. A part of your light has just found its way back. And for Sagittarius, that light was never something to chase on the outside. It came from the very place you once forgot, your own heart, the one longing to be trusted again. Thank you for not walking away. Thank you for having the courage to face what others often avoid. Thank you for simply being you. And if something inside you feels like it just opened, leave a small sign in the comments. I'm learning to return, and I'm no longer afraid of it. You may never know, but that one sentence from you might be the first light for another soul that's lost its way. Because healing always begins with sharing, and light always spreads from a heart that has learned how to soften. If this journey feels necessary for someone you know, send it to them, as a gift, as a sign, as a gentle message in a world that moves too fast. And if you want, I'll still be here to keep telling you the stories you've carried in your heart for so long. I'll see you again, on another journey, where we no longer need to run, but simply look into one another through the soft light of the soul and gently say, we are still here. We never truly lost each other.